Okay, cool. We are recording. Thank you everyone for joining today. I will go ahead and repost the agenda link in the chat here if anyone hasn't seen it. I think most of us here know each other, but maybe we could do really quick intros just for everyone's benefit. I guess I'll start. I'm Lane. I am helping steward this decentralized governance initiative in the Blockstack community. This is week 3 or week 4 now, so I'm really excited about how the project is going and to share updates with everyone this week. I did a bunch of stuff in the Ethereum community, including core development and governance stuff there as well. Yeah, that's me. I will go down the line, if that's okay, as they appear on my screen here. Jason, would you mind doing a quick intro?
Sure. So my name is Jason Schrader. I am an IT consultant, and I've been in IT support and networking for about 15 years now. So I'm just excited to contribute where I can and help out.
Thanks, Jason. And your contributions have been massive so far, so appreciated. Jenny?
Hey everyone, I'm Jenny, the digital community partner at Blockstack, and I'm here to help develop and grow this amazing community we have. I'm really excited, especially for the work that is coming out of this group.
Thank you so much, Jenny. And yeah, your support and help has been invaluable in bootstrapping this whole process as well. So thank you for that. Let's go to Juliet, please.
Hi, this is Juliet. I'm part of the Blockstack community, an evangelist, former lawyer, and founder.
Awesome. Thank you, Juliet. And finally, Philip.
My name is Philip Rowe. I'm been in the work in the software development since more than 20 years, and also on all kind of computer services. And I have been able to help many organizations, non-profit organizations related with the governance of promoting the software development, innovation, and also the software process improvement. You see, I've been member of the directors of this organization, the ACTI, and well, different flavors of technology. So then that's why I was interested in getting and trying to see if we can help something in the governance area. But of course, it's quite complex, and I see that there's very many unknown aspects of the governance, and especially trying to use that the technology. So that's been quite a interesting road to go and walk. So thank you for admitting all this process of learning.
Thanks for the introduction, Philip, and thanks for sharing those thoughts. We're very excited to learn from your experience as well. Happy to have you in the group. Okay, next up on the agenda is updates on what happened over the past week. I'll go ahead and dive into this, and then other folks can share other updates if I miss anything. So regarding resources, this is stuff like YouTube, the GitHub organization, Discourse and Discord, the chat and the online forum. Let's see, we posted the video recording of last week's community governance call on the YouTube channel. I think that's the only thing that's been added there. So it just contains those 2 videos from the first 2 calls for now. And of course, this one will go there as well. GitHub has been pretty active. Jason and a few other folks have very kindly contributed content to the resources repository. That's kind of the main one. Let me see if I can quickly post a link to that here. It is kind of cool. So if you haven't seen it in a while, take a look at it. Here is the link. So that's github.com/stacksgov/resources for anyone who's like watching a video and may not be able to see that text. So yeah, this has kind of grown a bit. It started as just a very short list of links that have been shared in the chat group, but with Jason's help and contributions of some other people, it's grown. It's now got a bunch of different categories in it. It's got a licensing section at the very bottom. We just wanted to make the licensing very explicit. There's a separate section on the governance calls. So yeah, I'll say this again later in the call, but if you're looking for a place to contribute, this is a really great place to get started. I sort of think of this as like our kind of shared knowledge base, and it's great to see more people contribute to it. So it's more decentralized and includes more people's perspectives. Yeah, there's been ongoing active conversation in the Discord chat group as well. So if, I suspect everyone here is in that group already because you got the link there, but for anyone who's listening and is not part of it, I don't know, Jenny, what is the easiest way for someone to jump on the Discord? Is there like a link on blockstack.org or something someone could find?
Yeah, chat.blockstack.org actually redirects to a Discord invite. So that's probably the easiest way if you're just new to the ecosystem.
Yeah, amazing. That is super helpful. I was not aware of that. Chat.blockstack.org.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, this is one of those multimodal situations where I'm trying to bear in mind that actually most of the people listening to this will probably, hopefully, be people listening to the recording of this call rather than people on the call right now. So it's helpful for us, I think, to include information like that as we go through our updates.
There's also a contribute Blockstack repo that I could share the link to that just has some basic information about each of the working groups. And there's a link to each of the specific channels on that repo. So I'll share that in the chat at the end of the call.
Great. Yeah, thank you. That's super helpful. I will make a point of including those links in the description field of the YouTube video.
Cool, thanks.
Since I think that, yeah, I'm pretty sure the chat does not appear in the video and it wouldn't be clickable even if it did. So Discourse is, of course, the forum. I guess that's forum.blockstack.org. Is that right, Jenny?
Yes. Sorry, I mute myself, but it's hard to find the button again.
Yeah. So just as a quick hint, this is something I found very helpful. If you are muted and you have the Zoom software open, at least on a laptop, I don't know about a phone, you can hold spacebar and it will let you speak temporarily. Quick trick that's been helpful for me.
So helpful, thank you.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so that's sort of the resources stuff. Regular updates. I know this is a little confusing the way this is written, but this refers to another repository on GitHub. I'll go ahead and post a link to it. That's the updates repository. Okay. And so the first of these went out last week, and I intend to publish these. There's no reason they shouldn't go weekly. I think after the call. So let's say by tomorrow, I want to wait until the call has happened so that I can make sure that I factor in updates that other people share. But we'll go ahead and publish these weekly, I guess. I'm not sure we have a ton to include in them every week, but for now, we'll kind of keep up that cadence. And like so much of the other governance stuff, this is like a totally open process, and that's why it lives on GitHub. You know, there's an open issue right now where you could go ahead and add things to the update. And then when I begin working on the update, that will become a pull request in that repository. So you can kind of see the work in progress, subscribe to it for updates, or just to see the final published updates. And we did have a number of contributions to the previous updates. That was also really, really helpful. The final thing under this bullet point is the stakeholder interviews. So I've been, as I'm sure most of you are aware, I've been conducting a series of one-on-one interviews with stakeholders throughout the Blockstack ecosystem, beginning with a bunch of PPC folks. Jenny helped connect me to people, but now beginning to speak to people in the broader ecosystem as well. I think I've done 4 of these so far. I have a 5th one scheduled today, 5th or 6th. I'm beginning to lose track, which is a good thing. I've taken very extensive notes on them, and I haven't done this yet, but I will clean those notes up, share them with each interviewee, let them review them, and then those notes can be shared publicly, although I think they'll probably be shared anonymously just to protect everyone's privacy. And I'm already beginning to see some kind of common themes and as well as some quite different perspectives on some of the questions I'm asking. Yeah, if you would like to nominate someone to be interviewed or to self-nominate, there's a form where you can do that, or you could, just casually message me on Discord. That works as well. But I'll keep those interviews up. I'll keep doing a few of them every week. And I don't know what the final number will be, but it's been very informative so far. And I'm really excited to share the outcome of those interviews with everyone. Any updates I missed? Any updates that anyone else wants to share?
All right, so the the spacebar trick didn't work for me on that one.
Darn. Sorry about that.
So updates, did you want to do that as part of the stand-up, or do you want to, or is that just in relation to what you have there?
Yeah, I as you're saying this, I realized there's literally 3 places on this agenda for updates. So I'll clean that up going forward. But yeah, we could just move into the stand-up. So Jason, if you're good with doing one, go ahead. Love to hear yours.
Sure. So mine's real quick in the focus of this group. I am working towards creating some community health files for the StacksGov repo. And that'll just be the default contributing and kind of issue templates, other things that I can add across all the repos. And just going to continue to try and help organize and consolidate resources. You know, I think we have a good flow in place. It's just going to take a little while to get used to it.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for the update. Do you have any, are you blocking on anything at all? Or are you waiting for anyone else to do anything?
No, from my end, I think we're right on track.
Awesome. And what's kind of the next thing you plan to work on, or what do you plan to work on over the next few days? I guess you kind of said it's the community health files, is that right?
Yeah, that's going to be my thing, is to look at some existing examples and see what we want to say in ours.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, thank you. That's super helpful. Would anyone else like to give a stand-up update? Please don't feel obliged to, but if you'd like to, we'd love to hear and offer, ideas and thoughts on resolving blockers and things like that.
Well, I've been trying to understand, the experience of different blockchain networks and what's the experience on governance and which are the issues or problems I've been facing. That's why I wrote some notes that I'm wondering at which are the actual problems that the different communities have had because of this governance. And because actually there's a lot of comments about the brutality of capitalism is shown in the blockchain arena, and then this dog eat dog, and there's many people mention that in different places, and so that means that there's something we have to maybe think about, how to deal with that. And one of the things that we are launching, also we have already launched a Blockstack app, and so we are going forward in terms of trying to get some revenues from the use of the application. Then you see that all that will come into our realm. I mean, about our users and all that, and that's something that we bring aboard the people and the users, because right now most of the majority of the population of the world is not aware about, they have heard something about cryptocurrencies and all that, but actually they don't imagine how that is being used. So that's something that we, in order to protect these people, we have to think of ways that we can govern ways to solve problems, because we cannot probably envision problems right now. So that's what I've been trying to see, but a very technical, I'm very technical also, but this is much more technical in terms of concepts, abstractions, and things. So that's quite a challenge. So then how this governance document is going to be, that will be if we get too technical, probably the people won't understand. So that's something that I've been trying to understand and see the challenges. That's why I was saying some principles that could govern us and that we could apply and all that. Sorry for the extension of my...
No, that's fine. Thank you for sharing that, Philip. That's really interesting to know. Is there...
one more thing. And then one aspect that is, we are, this governance is always under the law of one country or at least the world. I mean, of course, at international level, only United Nations, will be kind of a law, but it's of course something of enforcement is not being applied sometimes. But then the law at the end is the one that is going to, it has to be ways to apply the law. I mean, the law, general law and all that. So this governance has to be under the law, and we have to think how this has to be hooked up and offer the sufficient proof or whatever arguments, in order to be protected, in terms of the law. Oh, sorry about the interruption.
These are all super interesting and exciting questions. As you said in the beginning, governance is very complicated, and certainly a lot of the kind of questions you're raising are very relevant, I think, to Blockstack governance, and they're certainly on my mind. You mentioned launching an app and thinking about monetization and revenue. I believe we have a business models working group. Are you part of that group already?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm fan out. I mean, it's too many things to learn. But
Sure.
I've been several years. I've been 2017 working with Blockstack, but it's still you're riding a horse and the horse is going faster and faster.
That's a great metaphor. I like that a lot. I certainly feel that way. Yeah, thank you for sharing that update, Philip. A lot of really good ideas and questions in there that I'd love to unpack. Obviously, we have kind of limited time on this call, but I'm excited that you're in the governance working group. And yeah, let's take that conversation offline. Let's continue that conversation on the forum or Discord or places like that. It sounds like a lot of the questions you're asking are, as I said, some of the same ones we're looking into, and I think we could definitely contribute to each other's investigation, let's say. All right, well, let's keep moving with stand-ups. Does anyone else have an update they'd like to share, or blockers, or ask for help with anything? Okay, so we will keep moving. Let's talk about the community survey for a little bit. So this is, I moved this to its own bullet point because this is sort of the biggest initiative that's underway right now in governance. It's also the thing that I'm spending most of my time on. I suspect by now, most of you have probably seen either the Google Doc, which contains the preliminary set of questions, or else the draft survey. I'll go ahead and drop a link in here just in case you haven't seen either of those. So this is the Google Doc. So the current status is that I have taken this draft, this Google Doc draft, and implemented it, turned it into a survey using a tool called Typeform, which is pretty cool and pretty flexible. Has a bunch of different question types, and it's got really good UX, like on mobile and as well as desktop. And a few folks have seen that and commented on it, both with respect to content as well as just kind of the overall flow. So that feedback has been very helpful. Thank you for folks who contributed that feedback. I'm in the process now of factoring in some more helpful feedback I got, and expect to have what I would consider a viable, like a minimum viable first survey finished by tomorrow. And so I've been speaking to Jenny and Brittany and a few other people about how to approach the survey, how to launch it. And our thought right now is that we want to kind of not try to make it perfect in the beginning. We want to kind of be lean about it. And maybe a good next step would be to have the people in this working group, so on the order of 10 people, take the survey themselves, and then we can kind of discuss how well it worked and if there's things we'd want to change, or if it's too long, or if questions were misleading or anything like that before we distribute it more widely. And if possible, we would like to share it in a somewhat scientific fashion, right? So one of the pieces of feedback that I got from a few people is to kind of look at scientific survey methodology and at least where possible, try to factor some of that in. And so that would include things like trying to have a quote unquote representative sample of the community, or trying to like randomly sample people rather than just sharing it on social media, which means that, you know, like our friends and our friends of friends are going to be the only ones who see it. So we've got some ideas around how to do that. Things like sampling random names that have been created in Blockstack, or random Stacks token addresses, that sort of thing. So I'll share more on that, like when we figure out when, or how, and if we're going to be able to do that. I guess the other update here on the survey is that, so another line of questioning was just kind of like, what is the overall purpose of the survey? What are we kind of hoping to get out of it? What are the kind of action points that we can take when we get responses, which I'm really happy people asked about. That's like definitely a smart question to ask, and smarter to ask it now than after launching the survey, of course. So I typed up and shared my thoughts on that in the forum recently, as well as at the bottom of that document that I just shared. And as I've been going through the questions and kind of changing some of them and adding and removing some stuff, I've been factoring this thought in and my own evolving thoughts on it, and sort of tweaking some of the questions a little bit in response, and then making it very clear that every question has a clear action item associated with it. So as one example of this, the survey was originally asking in the demographics section, the first section, about location and sort of asking people about continents. And after discussing with a couple of people, we decided it makes more sense to change that to countries. And we decided it's a useful question to ask because it helps us with things like scheduling calls like this, knowing like roughly, you know, what time zone people are in, as well as thinking about things like where should in-person events like the Blockstack Summit happen in the future. Like if it turns out that we have a very large, you know, very active portion of the community who are in some place we weren't aware of or something, you know, from my perspective, it would be worthwhile investing in kind of in-person community and events and community management and stuff like that in that geography. I think that's the update on the survey for me. Does anyone have anything to add or any questions to ask about the survey?
Oh, I think you cut out there for a bit, Lane.
Uh-oh. That's a shame. Where did I cut out? Was it just the end?
For me, you're just asking if anyone had anything to add to the survey, but I don't think I said much more after that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the update. I may have, sorry, thanks for that. I may have hit the button too early. I was just asking if anyone has anything else to share about the survey, thoughts, concerns, questions.
Well, I have not seen your last implementation of the survey. The only thing is that I just is if we, I don't know if you included a question about, you know, the behaviors or challenges, but probably better word is will be challenges that you have seen in blockchains communities, because that's was a way to grasp the spirit of what's going on and how, if we had to take measures on this governance in order to avoid those things, if we want to avoid them, of course.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So Philip, I just posted a link here to the draft survey. As I said, it's not ready to be shared yet, but you can get at least a sense of what it's going to look like and how long it is and kind of the types of questions it's asking. It doesn't include my most recent updates, but it will soon. Let me think, challenges. I think that in the governance section of the survey, there's at least one question on this topic. I'm just going to quickly check. Yeah, okay, there's an open-ended question which says, what challenges, if any, do you see with the existing governance of the Blockstack project and platform? Do you think that's sufficient? Do you think we should ask in a different way? Should we ask about just kind of problems with governance in general? What do folks think?
Good idea. It's a bit more broad. I mean, it's or that you have seen somewhere else, and so in order not to be a shame. It's not gossip. It's just the spirit is to learn from that experience.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think we want to learn from issues that have arisen in governance, both of other blockchain projects as well as other, real world, quote unquote, real world things like corporate governance.
That's right.
I'm sorry. I guess my question in that regard is, do we think that the question for this survey should be relevant to that general audience or just to the Blockstack, the way it's set up in particular? And the reason I ask that is because I know as part of what we're doing in the project management, there was one for researching and reporting on existing blockchain governance structures. So is that a conversation we want to have in the survey, or is that something we want to take out to like the forum or somewhere else we can still discuss it in a really broad form?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The surveys in general, I think, are good for quickly getting the pulse of a community, or that's why surveys have a lot of multiple choice questions, right? I think if a survey is full of open-ended questions, in my experience, people tend not to engage deeply with them. I know personally I feel quite frustrated if a survey requires me to think really hard. So Jason, yeah, to your point, some of these more important, more open-ended questions, it might make sense to have them have an open discussion about them somewhere else, like the forum. Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm trying to think of how to ask this on the survey. One option is we try to turn it into a multiple choice question, and we say, which of these issues concerns you the most or worries you the most? And I could certainly come up with 5 or 6 or 7 examples from Ethereum governance and other projects I'm familiar with, but it is sort of by definition a leading question. It's not an open-ended question.
Yeah, I think my question is more, I like the question that's there and the way it relates to Blockstack directly, but I also want to acknowledge that Philip is right. We should definitely look at anything that's happened in the other ecosystems, and definitely to look at what they've done either to mitigate the problem or what we can do to prevent it ahead of time. So I would suggest keeping the survey question the same, even though it's a bit open-ended. It gives people a chance to kind of quickly state a concern. Whereas the conversation of what other blockchains are doing, I just feel like that's a bigger topic that we could tackle a different way.
Yeah, I agree. So sorry, I know that was part of your previous question. I didn't answer it directly, but I'm agreeing with you. I think that the survey aspect of what other projects are doing, I think that's definitely that doesn't belong in this survey probably. And so, yeah, maybe we can begin crowdsourcing that either, in the knowledge base on GitHub or on the forum, or both of those things. And also, to some extent, that's already happening as part of another initiative I'm a part of, which is called the Wharton Crypto Gov roundtable or working group. So there's actually been a stakeholder survey that was created for projects in general, and that to some extent also informed the questions I'm asking on this survey. And it's collected responses from at least a dozen projects already. So I think that's something we can lean on and learn a lot from.
Awesome, that sounds good.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you both for those questions and ideas. Bear with me, I'm just taking some notes here. I know, Jason, you're helping me take notes as well, which is really helpful. Does anyone else have any other thoughts or questions or concerns or ideas about the survey?
Just to the one question that you were that you asked previously, I think you read out the question from the survey regarding governance, and I think the question, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was about Blockstack's governance or previous governance. And the concern that I have is in looking at people's conversations around governance in the community, I'm not sure if they really know what governance is or what it means. I've seen a lot of ideas about rules of law as opposed to maybe on-chain governance or off-chain governance. So the concern of the question being very general is it sounds to me that if I'm going to answer it, I'm going to be thinking, yeah, Blockstack's done a great job, so that sounds good, without really knowing what's the governance that was in place. And maybe that's something that we can do some work around within the community, talking about, what is the governance model right now and what does that mean? So thoughts on that would be great.
Yeah, thank you, Juliet. I think that that's a really relevant point. Thinking about your point, I see there's two pieces of it. So the first is kind of like, what is governance in general? And the second piece is sort of like, to what extent do you understand the way governance kind of has worked historically or is working in the Blockstack ecosystem? Would you agree with that interpretation?
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that this survey is a great place to ask questions like that. And I know that there are questions about the second of those two, which is, I think the way it's phrased is something like, what is, in your opinion, the mission of Blockstack PBC? What is, in your opinion, the mission of the Blockstack project? And to what degree do you align with that mission? And I think there's a question about values in there as well, but it could be phrased a little bit differently. What do people think about how we should ask that?
Hi, everyone. I just joined the meeting, so but one thing that I also can apply upon what Juliet was saying is the fact that indeed governance is a very broad term and it can be interpreted in very different ways. Also, I think when you are really familiar with the blockchain world, that it's much easier, but you need to know that a lot of people and developers are joining Blockstack out of that world as well. That's one thing, and another thing I think that can maybe help is the fact how open source projects are governing their ecosystem. It's something that we also can learn a lot from.
I strongly agree with your last point, that we can learn a lot from the way other open source projects are governed. I'm gonna make a note here in the notes and put it in bold, so hopefully people see that and we can discuss that more. Just a thought to add on to that, a lot of what we're doing feels very new and very novel, trying to govern these quote unquote crypto economic networks, but actually a lot of this is not new, right? A lot of this has been done for decades in open source. And as you said, I think we can learn a lot from the open source communities.
Yeah, there are a lot of foundations that are being made with a lot of great stakeholders in these foundations. And that's something that I think is something that really works to drive things forward. One of them that I really like how they organize themselves in the open source communities is Gatsby. Something that I see that really helps, but there you see that a lot of developers are really empowered to take ownership of certain pieces of the whole stack, and not only I think Gatsby.com, but also other developers are really working hard on that. Also, how they are communicating within GitHub is something that really appeals to me. So that's something that we definitely need to look at. But that's also something that I need to bring up with when I can join the community dev calls. And another thing that's also nice to look into is the JavaScript foundation, where you have Node.js and you have other kind of players there. It's also something that I saw as a very good example where we can learn a lot.
Thank you for sharing those examples. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it.
I have a question. This is Dan. I think my confusion, and maybe others are, I'm hoping, not just me, is that we still haven't defined to Juliet's point and to George's point what the governance encompasses. So talking about you know, the question about how do you feel about how Blockstack has handled whatever it was. The only kind of visible indicator of a governance process up to this point has really been around app mining. I mean, if you're just kind of standing from the outside, we have, you know, a very heavy-handed, I don't want to say heavy-handed, it's a, you know, a very corporate controlled kind of approach to the development. And I know that PBC is working on that. And they accept PRs out in the open and all that stuff. It's not a complaint, but the structure of how the development team works is very different from the structure of how app mining worked. And like, where are the lines for governance and what's the whole point? Is just to align around what the Stacks Foundation should be doing, or what this, I mean, because I haven't even seen like a mission statement for what the Stacks Foundation is. Is this governance question potentially, I mean, are we going to come out of this whole discussion and say, you know what, we're not doing a Stacks Foundation? Because I saw other questions that were like, should app mining be included, right? I think Free Girl was asking that in the Discord. Or maybe he was just posing the question. Maybe it was Terje. I don't remember. Terje. But like, the question of, is app mining included in the questionnaire? To me, it's kind of secondary to kind of like, what's the whole point? Like, if we're focused on how do we govern a Stacks Foundation, that's one thing. If it's a question of, should we even have a Stacks Foundation, or is there a better methodology? That's a different question. And then to me, the more fundamental questions are, I think PBC is very strongly indicated they don't want to be in the business of governing the network, right? And app mining. So that's fair. A foundation, separate foundation, makes total sense. Have we talked about what that foundation should look like? Like, what's the structure of the foundation? Because the questions that we're asking, I don't know, to me, they don't seem very directed. And maybe that's just me, but that's just my thoughts. I'll let you comment.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, those are all super valid questions, and I really appreciate your bringing them up. And I want to encourage everyone to not be shy about asking questions that may seem obvious in retrospect or may seem controversial or whatever. Like, I think that's like so essential at this phase of the governance initiative. So I deeply appreciate that. What can I say? So the first thing I'll say is, in the one-on-one interviews I've been doing, I have been asking exactly those questions. I just want you to be aware of that. It is on my mind, right? So I've been asking questions like, what should the foundation look like? What should its scope be? Do we want a foundation in the first place? Are there other models we should look into? And I think that those are super relevant questions. I haven't asked those sorts of questions in this survey. And I guess the reason is because, as I said, the survey doesn't include many open-ended questions. It's much more kind of like multiple choice. And so I would say the goal of the survey is not really to kind of ask people like how they want things to be governed going forward. It's a little bit more to kind of gauge their level of like interest and understanding and stuff like that. I know that you weren't speaking specifically to the survey just now. I'm not going to try to answer the questions you're asking right now on this call. Number one, because I think it's not the right forum to do that. And number two, because I genuinely don't know, like I don't claim to know the answer to those questions, but I would like to open up this conversation for anyone else to jump in and share their thoughts. And in particular, the meta question, which is like, how do we make sure that everyone has a chance to weigh in on the most important questions, like what should the foundation look like? Do we want a foundation in the first place? Should it be governed? What should its scope be, et cetera?
Dan, just contributing to the discussion about the foundation, based on the last call, and I know you were involved in the last call, the foundation apparently is going to be a Singapore for the legal ramifications here. So not any decisions being made by anyone in the community, but the foundation is going to be set up in Singapore, and it's based on a number of handful of different types of foundations that you can put together in Singapore, and there'll be at least one director is required to be a Singapore native, and the director and the secretaries are required to be Singapore natives. And then the kinds of directors and how you select the directors and who the directors are going to be and what their role is, none of that has been discussed or decided with the community. So I know that Brittany is working on that, but we really haven't heard what's going on and what the status is at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's I totally remember that, and my confusion comes from the fact that it seems like we picked an idea. I say we, you know, a foundation idea was established. It was created. Its structure was defined, or at least semi-defined. But it still feels like, and that's all fine. It still feels like we're asking the community, like, what do you think? When we kind of define the direction. And I'm not seeing that communication going out. Like I'd like to maybe see not just the notes, but like, here's where we are. We have established this foundation, or it'll be established by the end of the month, whatever the timeline is. And here's its tentative structure. Do we have an opportunity to voice our thoughts on what that structure looks like? To your point about like how we fill those positions and all that other stuff, you know, like what are the open questions around the foundation? Because that's a fait accompli at this point, right? I don't think anybody's questioning that, but I don't see that the communication that as we talk to the community, indicates that any of that is really done, or it's the direction that we're going. If that makes any sense. Like, what are the open questions that we actually can contribute to around the foundation, we as the community? What are the decisions that have already been made and are basically kind of set? And then what are the questions? What are the things that somebody's already thought of this? What are the things that they think the foundation is going to manage? It's going to be app mining. What else? You know, like, where's that list of questions? Like, I saw one, like, we still don't know how the foundation is going to be funded, right? How do we do things like, as a community, talk about funding a foundation that is going to be put in place to manage how the funding happens? Does that make sense? There's a cart and horse thing, I think, there. So these are the things that are really confusing me. It feels like we've picked a path. We've picked a general structure, and we don't have that communication going out. We're still asking kind of general questions about what is governance.
But the basics are not right yet for me at the moment, right? Because one of the things that I see, for example, a lot of benefits in our collections, but then the one collection that been worked upon are contacts, but you don't see any further road on that. Also, the fact, and that's something that I also was thinking about, is a working group of data, for example, where we can define certain data structures and what are we going to open up between every application that's around there in the community as well. So these kind of things are very important and needs to be defined, and you need to create working groups around them to let them grow. But what I'm now feeling of is that a lot of people are just experimenting a lot on their own islands, and yeah, I don't know, but that's
so I think that's hugely valuable. What you're saying is hugely valuable. But my question would be then, does that have anything to do with the Stacks Foundation? Because, like, to your point, I like open source governance. I like working in GitHub, and I think on the development side, there's a different structure than what we're talking about in terms of managing funding or managing protocol changes to the chain and stuff like that are very different from, at least in my mind, from like, let's organize, let's finally come together as a community and organize around collections. And we've been doing that kind of ad hoc within the development community, mostly in forum and then just kind of individual chats. But does the foundation have a role in organizing development teams? Organizing development? I mean, like that's an open question to me.
Yeah, it's not only organizing development, it's organizing structure, it's organizing documentation, it's organizing education. One of the things that you see, for example, within W3C is the fact that they have also working groups and they also define certain documentations around what's going on. And yeah, in my opinion, these are very basic things that needs to be set up for the moment, and I don't see them. And I think these are very important to take the next steps forward. Another thing that also struck me down is the fact that I saw a lot of things about the proof of transfer. I also read a lot about it, but a lot of things are also very complex.
See, I think that's again, I think that's hugely valuable. Like, if this is the direction, and if you could like send me a link or send us all a link to like the community you just mentioned. I don't remember who it was you just said. They have documentation working groups or whatever. Like, I like to see how other groups are doing those kinds of things. But that's a huge impact on how stewardship of a foundation is voted upon and who is voted upon, because quite frankly, if we leave it up to PBC, it's going to be all VCs and people like that, right? And I don't see any of them being, I mean, they might be good at organizing and managing, setting up leadership for subgroups or for working groups, whatever, and that might be fine, but maybe then the community goes, hey, you know what, we want somebody who has a little bit more of a development background as part of this leadership team, right? So these are questions like, what is the foundation actually going to cover? Is it development? Is it funding? Is it whatever else? So these are big important questions to me.
Thank you, guys.
Probably that's the question that we have to put in the survey, and those are the questions. My view that is that it's difficult for all the people that are participating in the community that to understand a whole view, a whole picture of what's going on. And as you said, there's always some people that have been working on this field some years, and they lead because they have the information. So then one of the aspects that is very good is that the openness that has been happening with this kind of forums or work groups that let us understand what's going on. Of course, it was kind of a surprise to understand that the Singapore was going to be the one that that's going to have the foundation, and then I didn't see, because I've been since the beginning in the governance group and what's going on, and never saw any discussion about, you know, a research of which countries in the world has a good environment for foundations, you see, and then suddenly, you know, Singapore was selected. And so then I was, okay, Estonia, I heard that they had one of the blockchain regulations, they haven't put in there. And so then I started wondering what's going on that. But of course, this is something that probably we had to put in place, and Dan is quite active in participating, giving his voice, and I appreciate your interest in participating. I don't have the time to talk so much, and only in this moment, sorry about this long talk, but I think that this is the opportunity to express, and then Lane could be, you know, he's been selected in order to convoke this work. So I hope this work has a good ending. But then the other thing is that, of course, the foundations, as Juliette was saying, the law is something that is already probably defined. So the structures are defined, and the foundations, the way that you have to implement the foundations in different parts of the world, they're already defined. So we have to jump on one of those and use that part, and then adjust our knowledge on top of that. But the knowledge, the new knowledge, is about this people, this concept of that the blockchain will govern by itself, and I don't believe it fully. But that's a new concept that we have to discuss. Sorry about extending so much.
Thank you, Philip. Yeah, I mean, we're coming up to the top of the hour, and I do want to be cognizant about trying to roughly stick to the schedule for the call. If we feel that 60 minutes is not enough for these calls in the future, I'm happy to officially make it like a 90-minute call or something if necessary. Yeah, let me really briefly try to summarize some of these questions and respond to them briefly. So thank you everyone for all sharing your thoughts and ideas and concerns and questions. I think there are very important and valid questions that are being asked about some of the basic governance things, like, like number one, is a foundation the right structure? Number two, if it is going to be a foundation, is Singapore the right choice, or why was Singapore chosen? How should the foundation be governed, assuming we have a foundation? What should its scope be? What should its quote unquote, charter or mission be? Should it be responsible for funding? Should it be responsible for development, for other things? These are all questions that are like on my mind. And I would respond by saying a couple of things, right? The first is that like the actual formation of the foundation, of the legal entity, is not within my personal scope of work, right? That is something that PBC is leading, and unfortunately Brittany's not in this call. She's the right person to answer, I think, a lot of those questions, but we will make I have taken notes, I have a list of these questions, and we will share them over the next week, and maybe we can get a response from her or someone else to them in the meantime, and or hopefully she can join on the next call and speak to them directly. I do think that they're all like super valid questions. My understanding is that, as Juliet mentioned, there is going to be a foundation. That's the working plan. It will be a Singapore entity, and my understanding of PBC's plan is that it will be quote unquote minimum viable to start, right? So it will be the most basic structure with one person of record, one, I guess, executive director or director, and I don't know, maybe some small number of other people. And beyond that, what happens to it, I think in large part is up to us. So I think my main response, Dan, to the questions that you were raising is like, it's on us, right? Like, this is a permissionless peer-led kind of commons project. And so, we need to come together and figure out how we want this thing to be run and what role we want it to have. And my very strong feeling is that, as long as we're reasonable in our expectations and our thoughts, which I'm sure we will be, I don't foresee issues. I think PBC will be very happy to kind of consider our proposals. So maybe the closing thought here is like, let's all ponder this for the next few days, and maybe we need to start drawing up some proposals. And I'd love to work on that with everyone and to hear everyone's thoughts and ideas.
On that, Lane, so I hear what Dan is saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but all this activity has been obviously super valuable in just understanding how governance works, what it could look like for our ecosystem. But I wonder if, as an exercise, it would be valuable to sort of surface all of those different work streams that we're involved in. So Elijah mentioned like data collections, for example, and Dan was talking about like, is there an opportunity to have more dev leadership? These are all things that we could consider, and I wonder if, like, as an exercise with the community, we could sort of organize all of those different work streams under these different questions. So, at the moment, if we're talking about leadership for the board of the foundation, this is what we're currently leaning toward. But if the community has strong objections to that, what other proposals would you make? I'm kind of like, this is like stream of consciousness right now. I had a more formulated thought, but sometimes I feel like in hearing Dan's questions, I feel like there's maybe a disconnect between the directive to work together to figure out what we want for ourselves and like the practical reality of it. And sometimes it's actually been really helpful for me to just see examples of what does it mean when we talk about the scope of the foundation? Well, currently this is what we think it means. Does anyone have strong objections to that? If so, like, let's brainstorm. Does that make sense? Does what I'm saying make sense?
So it makes a lot of sense, Jenny. So thanks for that. I just want to then pile on what Dan said. I wanted to say, Dan, you nailed it with your questions. And I think each of those questions need to be outlined, and then we need to follow up and work as a community on answers to those questions. So thanks for raising that. I just want to put those 2 cents in there because I think it's really, really important that those questions are being answered. And we don't have any input at this point with respect to, you know, while it's on us, where is it that we're making this input? How are we contributing our input? How are we being heard for these particular concerns? And so thanks.
Yeah, and one thing that I wanna add on that is that indeed transparency and clear communication is very important into that case, because indeed I also hear all about funding as well, and that's something that I'm not really aware of what these directions are going to be, and yeah, it makes more sense to really communicate clear and on that to get everyone at the same direction as well. And I think that's a very and that will be a very big challenge, I guess.
Cool. Yeah, I agree with what you said a moment ago, Juliet. So I volunteer to basically type up a list of these questions as Dan put them forward on this call, and as other people have raised other questions as part of the process of taking notes and sharing them in this call. Happy to put them on the forum as a starting point, but I do invite and ask everyone else to contribute, right? I mean, whether that means trying to answer the questions, whether that means adding other questions, whether that means making sure other people have a chance to weigh in, like this needs everyone's contribution. Is there anything else, anything else concrete that anyone wants to kind of volunteer to do, like I just did, or kind of ask that someone else volunteer to do?
I'll keep on. Well, I think the one concrete thing is to look at the survey, isn't it? So,
yes.
Yeah.
That is a big ask. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of move towards ending the call, given that we're a few minutes over. Jason, furiously taking notes. Thank you so much for doing that. That's really helpful. So I think we have at least 1 or 2 clear action items, right? One of them is to draw up a list of questions that were raised on this call today, which I will do, and work on getting answers to those questions. And some of those answers will hopefully come from the relevant stakeholders in the PBC side, and other questions I think we need the community to weigh in on. That's very important. So we'll work on that over the next week.
Lane, I'd be happy
Yeah.
to help you sort of sort those questions into different categories. So into different macro categories of governance. So for each of these specific questions, it could actually help illustrate to community members what aspects of governance we're working on when we end up answering those questions.
And I'm happy to advocate for getting those questions answered and pushing it forward, and helping out with working with the community to get the questions answered.
Amazing. Thank you both. That is
Yay.
super helpful. Yay, teamwork. Okay, great. Yeah, so I'll get that draft list of questions to you guys by tomorrow, and we can move forward from there. Jenny, I like the idea about sorting them into categories. We should also consider if we want to include any of them on the survey. My feeling is that these are probably 2 separate initiatives, but we'll kind of see where we stand tomorrow. Okay, so moving to the next bullet points here, just very briefly, ways to get involved, both for the folks on this call as well as people who may be listening to the video on YouTube. Look for that list of questions that should go up in the community category on the forum, most likely. So that's forum.blockstack.org. And then I think you have to click the working group category and then the governance category there. Sorry, I think I said community, I meant governance. the survey. So we'll share that in the governance working group channel on Discord. So please, when that's up, hopefully tomorrow, take it, fill it, respond to it, let us know your thoughts. As I said earlier, there's the resources repository at github.com/stacksgov/resources. We'll continue to open issues there, and people can feel free to add links and things to the knowledge base, contribute to the regular updates. I'll try to get one of those out by tomorrow. Did I miss anything? Are there any other asks for help from anybody here? All right. The next call. So our schedule is this time slot on Wednesdays, weekly. Does anybody have any strong objections to this time slot? Again, I guess if they do, they're probably not in this call, but I'll ask anyway.
No problem for me.
Fine here.
As long as I have my coffee.
Yeah, Jason, I know it's a little early where you are. I feel you on that. Great. So we'll stick with this time slot weekly for now. If it's an issue for folks, or folks are listening to this and not able to join, then please jump in on the Discord channel and let us know. We can adjust in the future if necessary. And then, yeah, I wanted to leave this as a little bit of an open thing at the end. Are there any other updates that anyone else wants to share about anything governance related? Going once, going twice. Okay. Thank you all so much for your time today. This has been a fantastically productive and informative call. Again, I deeply appreciate everyone taking time to join and asking the hard questions. And I look forward to continuing the dialogue pretty much every day, in the usual channels, and speaking again next week.
All right.
Excellent.
Thank you so
Thank you very much, and have a
Thank you.
nice week.
Thanks, Lane. Talk
Thanks,
to everyone.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.